And what is being hailed as a big win for Donald Trump, the National Defense Authorization Act has passed. It is a major, major piece of legislation from the standpoint of the military budget, $738 billion, yes, with a B, dollars. This number is mind-blowing to me, despite living in this country. When I'm looking at foreign politics around the world, let's say somewhere like the UK, they quibble over billions. We're dumping $738 billion into the military, and it is bipartisan. Democrats, Republicans, hand in hand, running in the sunlight, screaming, yes, we found something that we agree upon. But after all, I keep making the point, it's not bipartisan per se. These parties just agree on fundamentals of the way the world works. I don't believe it's two parties. Trump puts out this tweet. Wow! All of our priorities have made it into the final NDAA. He's effusive with this. Pay raise for our troops, rebuilding our military, paid parental leave, border security, Space Force. Congress, don't delay this anymore. I will sign this historic progression defense legislation immediately. They went so far as to call it the most progressive military budget that has been created. They got rid of the progressive priorities in this budget, put more constraints on the way the president goes about his war powers, constraints on the Yemen conflict, the Iran, the Iran deal, nuclear deal. All of these various things that they wanted in the budget, they were cast aside, they were thrown away, and they were given breadcrumbs. Now go! Get away from me! We've given you parental leave for a few weeks. Now go. Now the catch here is, why on earth is paid parental leave in a military budget anyway? It's utterly bizarre, and it gets across that it is literally breadcrumbs, incremental politics. Here's something. Now go shut up and sit in the corner and leave us to our devices, the adults in the room. Democrats, Republicans were on board. Now, from the standpoint of where the money is going, overseas contingency operations, $71.5 billion. Space Force, $10.6 billion. Defense-related activities outside NDAA jurisdiction, $8.1 billion. And by the way, Space Force was the thing that the parental leave was traded on. Meaning, all right, fine, you get your paid parental leave, but I want my Space Force. And this is, by the way, at a time where SNAP benefits are being cut across the country. People are going to die as a result of the changes that Trump made to SNAP. However, $738 billion. Bam. Sails through. No negotiation in real terms needed. 377 to 48. And you had a lot of lefties that were pissed off. And I strongly suspect that part of that being pissed off is showing how little weight that their perspective is given in real terms, in material terms, not in rhetoric, but in deed. Warren comes out, and she's not on board for this. She doesn't like this. And I got to be honest with you. Part of the reason I dislike Warren is stuff like this. Let me show you what I mean. The Pentagon's budget has been too large for too long. I cannot support a defense bill that is $738 billion Christmas present to a giant defense contractors and undermines our values and security. The NDAA does nothing to end our disastrous and inhumane support for the Saudi ops in Yemen, nothing to prevent a war with Iran. It permits deployment for destabilizing low-yield nuke weapons. For that, and the $738 billion other reasons, I don't support the bill. Now, newcomers to politics may look at this and be like, yes! Yes! Problem. She has supported Trump's previous bills that were also grotesque and bloated. And once again, because there's a presidency, she has evolved on this issue and now rebukes the point of view that she had prior. This is Emma Vigeland doing a decent job here, asking her a decent question.
Her answer. You have focused a lot on progressive domestic policy. You also voted for a military budget increase in 2017. How does that square with your progressive politics when we're talking about foreign policy?
If the question is, do I think we should cut the military budget, the answer is yes. And
But that wasn't the question. Let's stop there. That wasn't the question. The question was, how do your progressive bona fides stack up against you supporting and backing a military budget? That wasn't the question. She's reframed the question. That means she's blowing past this question, but listen to her answer.
I'm now on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I've had this fight over and over. But there's another part to it, too. We need to stop the control over our defense budget that's exercised by the giant defense industry. As you know, we now have a Secretary of Defense.
Now, we're wildly out of what Emma Vigeland originally asked. She's making the point that these bills are corrupt, that this contract that these guys have where they're working along with politicians and everything else, this is rife with corruption. Now, Emma Vigeland's next question should have been, how do your progressive bona fides stack up against you voting for a military budget that you knowingly just said was corrupt? But now, we're in the presidency. She's evolved on this issue. And now she is against the military budget. That feels a lot like Ryan Grimm leading her, trying to get her to say Bolivian coup, please, the people who read me needs you to say Bolivian coup, that type of stuff. It's parroting as opposed to actually reality. The reality of it is you voted for that military budget last time. Why all of a sudden are you all that bothered this time? Does it have to do with you running in an election? I would wager to you that a lot of people who were supporting Warren at one point, who thought that her and Sanders were 1-to-1, have started to see the light. The last Emerson poll that was released saw a significant drop in Warren's support and a significant increase in Sanders' support. And to some degree, you can make a case that the people who are leaving her are going to him. Yes, some of these are the Pete Buttigieg crowd, so don't misunderstand me, but a larger share of Warren's support when asked if she wasn't in the race, who would you go to? They chose Sanders. And at some point, perhaps as we get closer and closer to the polling, we've started to hit pay dirt. Warren has decided to take a new tact. Pocahontas has become a Comanche. I know that joke is slightly racist, but I'm going to go with it. And has decided to go on the offensive. I'm calling it food fight at fourth. Because ultimately she's attacking Pete Buttigieg for something that she herself is also susceptible to get attacked on. I will explain what I mean. It's not that her attack is wrong. What she's bringing up is perfectly fair and legit in the context of the election. I mentioned it myself. She and the media have started to look keenly in regards to Buttigieg's work with McKinsey, but also with the non-transparency in regards to his campaign. In this case, she has opened up in the way that she opens up, going after Buttigieg. Food fight at fourth. And by the way, the reason for this is obvious. This is right here. This is Morning Consult. Now, this is just one poll, but the trend holds, meaning the trend line in this particular poll looks just like the Real Clear Politics average, where you can see over a swath of polls certain trends take into effect. And one of these major trends that is taken into effect that I strongly suggest to you is part of the reason for Warren's change in tact is this. This is just one, but this is one of the good ones. It has like 5,000 people who they contact. And again, this is indicative of the same trends that are taking place across the board when you look at the polling. This is Joe Biden. This is Elizabeth Warren. This is Sanders. If you notice, inflection point, she plummets. Outright plummets. Now, again, this has to do with the disingenuous factor. If Warren came out and said she was just for a public option, nobody has an issue. But you have said that you were for Medicare for all for 3 months. You put out an unworkable financial plan that just looks dodgy from the start. And then you follow that up with a Medicare for all plan on paper that in reality, nobody believes you're going to get 2 bites at the apple. You just wanted to associate yourself with something that you knew was popular while creating a politically unworkable situation just to be able to claim that you were for Medicare for all. it's not just me. There's some people who love you and believe in you, in which case they're just kind of accept what you're saying, despite of how unworkable, and just unrealistic it is. But there are others who look at this and say, she's being disingenuous. She's not being honest. And those people who think you're being disingenuous and not being honest, what do? They leave. Plummet. Look at Sanders. Ascendant. And again, this is not just one. This is the trend across polls. You can't just plummet like this and not do anything. So what did she do? Her new strategy is, I need to come out swinging. And the person I need to hit is the guy who's closest to me, who's eating into my numbers. That person being, one, Pete Buttigieg. Now, I got to be honest, I don't believe Pete Buttigieg is a thing because Pete Buttigieg can't get the black vote. However, media has been giving him lavish amounts of attention. And when you're looking at the polling from the early states and on, he has crept up. And in large part, you can argue, crept up based on her numbers, especially in the early states that tend to be whiter. That's her reasoning for doing it. Now, this reasoning for doing it also implies something about the field, that ultimately the race is boiled down into Biden and Sanders, and then everyone else. And her and Buttigieg are having a food fight at fourth. And again, the point I want to make here is the food fight is not something where she comes off cleanly on. It is something that also tarnishes her. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal patron. The polling from the standpoint of Sanders has been looking quite good. He's been in first and second in pretty much every state, meaning in the early states. And even from the national polling thing, he has been not just stable, but ascendant. The same thing can't be said for Warren, however. And there's only so far you can go where you've been dropping for months on end, or at the very least for the last 2 months, precipitously. And one person has been eating your lunch, meaning a certain part of your base, but the other part of your base are going home, coming to Jesus. And I mean that in the sense that she's been aping Sanders for the very specific reason that she knows that there are various people who love what Sanders is saying, is okay with a cuddlier version of Sanders, and if just so happens she also has a vagina, even better. Well, the moment that those people's eyes are awakened, those people go home. So she has to find some way to stem the tide on this stuff. So she keeps her shtick with the Sanders stuff. All of a sudden now she's anti-war when she's really not. And she decides that she needs to hit the person that is eating in part into her numbers. That person being Buttigieg. She does so somewhat effectively. But again, this is not a clean hit. This is one of those cases where it comes immediately back to her. And Buttigieg's campaign immediately hit back at Warren, asking about her time at the law firm as a corporate lawyer. Let's start here.
Now, unlike some candidates for the Democratic nomination, I am not counting on Republican politicians having an epiphany and suddenly supporting the kinds of tax increases on the rich or big business accountability that they've opposed under Democratic presidents for a generation. Unlike some candidates for the Democratic nomination, I'm not betting my agenda on the naive hope that if Democrats adopt Republican critiques of progressive policies or make vague calls for unity, that somehow the wealthy and well-connected will stand down.
Now, that's a fair point that she's making. In fact, I think her point is apt. The catch here is they're not making those attacks because they buy into it per se. They're making those attacks because they need to get through the primary. And they can't credibly take a position that Sanders has been taking, or for that matter, even that you've been taking at the very least in the beginning before you put out your Medicare for All plan. And so they're taking the position that they're needing to win. Biden is only being who Biden is. And they believe Biden for what he is, essentially Obama's vice president and an establishment politician. He's a stand-in for Hillary Clinton in this case. He's representing a particular class. He is the stand-in for that class, the friendly face for that particular class, just old Joe. They are trying to find a pathway in order to get to the primaries. So in some cases, you have a ton of billionaires that are putting money in their pockets, meaning you can look at the number of billionaires that are putting money into Pete's pocket. And her 2 points are straightforward. The time that you've been working at McKinsey is problematic, and that needs to be an accounting for that. The non-transparency in your fundraisers is problematic, and you need to allow the press to come in. Now, both of these are points that I think she thinks she's clean on, but at the very least, I don't think necessarily she is. Now, from the McKinsey point, this has started to draw blood. They're not letting people into your fundraisers point, I think matters less. I mean, ultimately, the candidate is being bought. Who's buying him, to me, seems less relevant than the fact that your candidate is being bought by wealthy interests. Those are going to be the people who have a seat in the room, the people who essentially helped him to get into that office. And that, again, goes in large part to the people who are putting money in their pocket. So the transparency thing, yes, I guess that matters, but he's being bought. That seems to be more important. The McKinsey thing is different. And I explained in my other video why. That reaches to the needs and the heart of the individual. If you are working in a capacity where your job, even if it was just as a number cruncher, was to find ways to lay off workers, and I showed the video yesterday where he was talking about duplicative workforce. Well, he was talking about that in the context of his work. That work being, we need to trim the fat. We need to get rid of some folks and fire some folks. That, again, goes to the heart of the Mitt Romney issue, where Obama, Bain Capital, Romney being, I'm getting rich off of firing human beings, getting rid of them, their ability to feed and clothe and put a house over their head and pay for their baby. I'm sorry, wife, I no longer have a job. I was part of a duplicative workforce. That does bite. That has a mysterious quantity to it in a way that it can be exploited. That is not entirely calculable. Right off the bat, however, Buttigieg hits back at Warren with this notion of, well, we need a proper accounting of what you were doing as a corporate lawyer. Now, this hits at Warren also. The same questionable quantity of how it could be exploited from the standpoint of Pete is also true for Warren. You can't have one without the other. Warren was working as a corporate lawyer in an asbestos case with Travelers. Now, she has a certain story of this, but ultimately, they didn't want to pay future penalties for the asbestos. Now, when Warren left that case, however, Travelers won another case where they didn't have to pay him at all. So this looks bad. I mean, you have another situation where she was working, what is called LTV, I believe it's called. Yeah, LTV. And working a coal mine. Here we are. Fighting for the coal mine to prevent coal miners from getting health care. The LTV case involved a Supreme Court appeal where Warren helped handle on behalf of LTV Steel, which was fighting in court over its liabilities to health insurance fund for retired coal miners. A former industrial conglomerate was trying to avoid paying millions of dollars into a fund that would help pay health benefits for retired coal miners and their spouses. The firm, which was involved in the bankruptcy proceeding, hired Warren for her expertise on the topic. Essentially, to not pay for the health care of real flesh and blood coal miners. Now, she's saying she made over $2 million in her work over the last 20 years for this. Fair enough. I am loath to understand how these two cases are dissimilar. Now, I've argued in the last video that in some part, there are 2 points of view. We have a capitalistic system, and that capitalistic system intersects a democratic system, or the other way around, I should say. We have a democratic order, and that capitalistic system intersects. We are forced, just in the way that we go about our affairs, to serve two masters. Cash, and you can say community. And there are material disadvantages and material benefits for the service of both. And you're stuck where you have these straightforward kickbacks for behaving in a particular way from the standpoint of cash. And your society and everything else says, this is great. You've earned. This is success. It's just so happened that in the way of pursuing their jobs, one was taking a job of firing others, and the other one was taking a job at preventing people from getting health care. And it gets worse. When pushed on this and asked for Warren's on corporate list, meaning who are the people who you were working for, back in 2012, she says, I don't have that list. You only know a few of the people that she was involved in assisting in this regard. I don't know how that helps one or the other. Both look bad. In a capitalistic system standpoint, they're not bugs. They're necessary. Understand what I mean by this. This needs to be very plain. In our capitalistic system, they don't hire you because they owe you a job. They hire you because they want to make a profit. And they're trying to make that profit. There are times where they trim fat, and there are other times where they try to avoid paying for your health expenses. Both of those things are expensive, and both of those things get in the way of them producing their profit. The Warrens of the world and the Buttigiegs of the world or the Mitt Romneys of the world are necessary for the capitalistic system to run. If you are angry at what they did in this system, then you need to be angry at the system itself. They're not bugs. They're features. They're necessary features. Now, you can make a case that said these guys could have gotten a job in some other capacity of the system. Fair enough. But let's just be clear that what they were doing was the way that they came about their ends in a system that rewards them for doing just that. Community is different, though. Democracy is different. And again, in serving two masters, it is perfectly okay for us to come together as a democratic order and say, we don't like that. You intersect with us in regards to how we go about our way. That is true, but we don't approve of the way that you went about earning your ends, despite the fact that earning your ends is intricately bound to this system. They are first and foremost human beings, but as being human beings, they don two hats. All of us do. If any of you wanted to get into Congress or politics, whatever you were doing to make your ends is still a part of you. Just like when you're getting into Congress, you may still need ways to make your ends. And all the incentives in the world, material and from a societal, you could say, evaluation, say that the more you make, almost regardless of how you make it, is acceptable. But in a democratic process, we look at that and we frown upon that because us, as a collective, realizes that there are certain jobs that are antagonistic to what we need and the way that we go about pursuing our lives. Yes, that company may be bloated. By the same token, that is an individual that is losing their jobs. And that is not wrong in the least for that person who lost their jobs to be angry and upset and put off by the fact that their material needs have just gotten that much more vulnerable or unconstrained. Both look bad. It's a food fight. Both end up looking bad. And again, I make the point that it clarifies the field and even the fact that this food fight is taking place. Now, she's not just hitting Buttigieg here. She's also hitting Biden, and to some degree, she's hitting Bloomberg. Fair enough. Bloomberg has dumped $100 million into this race, and he's been in this race for less than a month. Tom Steyer has dumped $3 million into the race. Essentially, two billionaires trying to buy an election. That is astonishing. So I don't necessarily take her point as being entirely wrong. Her point is apt. I'm just making the point that in her attacks on Buttigieg, these attacks do go both ways in regards to the logic. If your logic is that person was doing something untoward that adversely affected other people, then yes, that person was a good capitalist in that sense. But in some sense, so were you in regards to your responsibilities while you were within that system also. And it's a weird case, right? I mean, you would want that people have a sense of community where they would say, I don't want to take that job. By the same token, that job is sweetened that much more for you to take it. Everything, especially in the way that you might have been raised and everything else, might find this is a necessary part of our capitalistic system. There's nothing wrong with this. However, as a person that is empowered in a democratic order that carries more weight than this intersecting capitalistic system, I can take an opinion of that you were, despite working in the context of this system and being fair game within the context of the system, doing things that were adversely affecting other human beings. Those human beings matters more. I'm sorry you took that job. I don't think you are. And yeah, I can make a decision despite the fact that within the context of capitalism and our economic system, what you were doing were fair game. It is also fair game for me to take an opinion of what you were doing and say no, especially if I want that particular system to change. Why on earth would I put somebody in that position who benefited greatly off of that particular system? In a food fight, this hurts both. By the same token, Warren is right in what she's saying. And she is unleashed, but she is unleashing mainly for political reasons. Balthazar, when you're losing supporters to Peter Beam's bourgeois, God damn it, I always get this word wrong. You have the majority rethink your platform. Yes. It's like attracting Nazis on the leftist platform. Yes. You have a rethink when you're plunging in the polls. I mean, for fuck's sake, you go from being a strong second to a first and then plunge. Like, I mean, look at this. Plunge. Waterfall. Implosion. Falling apart. All at once. Yes, you have to rethink what you're doing. You have to rethink what you're doing. All right. I'm going to end this. Oh, by the way. Bourgeoisie. That's it. Thank you. Bourgeoisie. I always fuck up the word. Every time I see the word, it's like I've read. The sad part is I've read Communist Manifesto, or at the very least I listened to the book. So this word I've encountered on more than one occasion, but I can never pronounce it right when I see it. I always have trouble pronouncing that word. Bourgeoisie. Thank you. Bourgeoisie. There was something else. Oh, I know what it was. So, 22 minutes before the polls close in the UK. Oh, this is exciting. Now, the way they do their polling in the UK, and I'll make this quick, they take exit polls. And based on the exit polls, they make certain projections in regards to who wins what seats. The actual, yes, this is blessed by the Queen or whatnot, takes place later. But in the beginning, they try to make these evaluations on who wins what based on exit polling. So once this is ticked down, this is going to be exciting. Also, keep in mind, they don't choose their elected representatives like president in the same way we do. Think of it as if the House of Representatives chose the president. So whoever the House of Representatives went with, be it Republican or Democratic hands, that party would essentially choose somebody who's their leader. That leader of the party would be president. So that's the way that parliamentary seats are made. So it's not so much of how is Jeremy Corbyn popular or whatever. A lot of the stuff is also won within the council seats or within the seats themselves in the various districts. And depending on who gets the most seats, that determines who will be the prime minister. God, I hope I'm wrong. I want Corbyn to win so bad. I was telling my wife, I was like, I'm conflicted between ego versus out of world. And the conflict is not a serious conflict. Nobody wants to be wrong. I would prefer, I think, to be wrong on this. I mean, it looks like Labor is catching up. The problem is the amount of time that they had for an election was only like a month. I couldn't believe that that's all they were going to go for. It was like, yeah, let's just do a month. What? What do you mean a month? How do you build a campaign? How do you make that campaign stick? Especially if you're starting off behind, you want as much time as you possibly can to try to mine that gap. Well, he's gaining in some way. You could say Labor seems to be gaining. It seems to be taking a momentum. Whether that's sufficient to win or whether that's sufficient even to cause a hung parliament. Hung parliament gets interesting because the other parties may come together to try to thwart whatever Boris Johnson is trying to do. That means that they may choose somebody to lead. Now, whether that will be Corbyn is a hard sell, especially for Lib Democrats. But again, he may outperform. In 2017, he outperformed. By the same token, the Labour Party accepted the referendum results. And in this case, this comes across as a de facto Brexit. And it's a hard tell. If this is entirely about Brexit, I think Labour loses. If this is about the NHS, then I think Labour has a good fighting chance. I don't know. It's exciting, though. It's exciting. Diane 3. Labour should have correlated with the Greens. Mistake that they didn't. Garden, no. It has an R in it. Boris Bourgeoisie. Yeah, bourgeoisie. I never get the name. Like, I know the word when I see it. I even know what the word means. And it's one of those things where for whatever reason, it doesn't necessarily connect right in my head of bourgeoisie. It's like, bourgeois, what? I know what you're trying to say. I can't pronounce the words. No worries. That's why my audience is here, to correct me when I fuck up. Patrick Seguin, or just want money and don't care about anyone else who is suffering. Bourgeoisie works every time. Marcus Rocha. JT, think of the Madonna song. No, you're right. And I got to be honest, like, Isosceles, ISOSCELES, Mississippi, MISSISSIPPI. I got those wrong on a test going back to the second grade, and I remember those things to this day for that reason. It's the idea, not the word that counts. That's true, Animaxa. But unfortunately, you can't hear my thoughts. And because you can't hear my thoughts, the idea needs to somehow be communicated. I could be the most genius man on the planet. And if I'm in a coma, even if I'm aware, you have no idea. But yes, Animaxa, thank you for the dodge on that point. I appreciate it. All right, I'm going to end this because I want to get something in during this election because I'm excited about what happens. It is possible that something takes place that goes beyond what the media is projecting in regards to the polling. And if Labor overperforms, oh my God. They are terrified of a Jeremy Corbyn government. The pound even hit the skids for a little bit as they got jittery with the whole election stuff. It's like, oh fuck, he could come to power. But we'll see. We have 17 minutes. They're saying that there is no chance for a Labour government to come about. Those are just men and human beings that are trying to predict and gaslight. Maybe not. People are saying that Corbyn will overperform. Maybe not. Boris Johnson, for the first time, will be tried in the fires of an election. And he's coated and wrapped himself in Brexit. Now, this man is a flagrant liar. And he is saying that no harm is going to come to the NHS. I don't know if your conservatives are like the ones here in the United States, but they have wet dreams over your NHS. They touch themselves inappropriately over you. Go back and look at the video with Trump and Theresa May and the smile that comes over his face when he's saying it's all on the table. Oh, it's all on the table. It's all on the table. If Bojo is going to sell you out magnificently, and I would say again, it really honestly is this notion of ignoring the referendum on one hand with a Corbyn government that has a ludicrous position on Brexit. And a guy who's going to fuck over the NHS. Go vote. Have at it. Which one do you want? And, for me, if I think I was living there, I think I would choose Corbyn. But I would be resentful if he got rid of Brexit. Which would have had consequences later on in regards to my interaction with Labour. I have problems with this, like philosophical problems with this notion of a party blowing away a referendum. You vote. And a ruling class comes in and says, we don't like that vote. And do everything that they could to stifle and to stop you for it. And you have two major parties, both of which says, yes, we're going to live up to the guidelines of the referendum. Tories, consistent. They got to be consistent. They're the one who put the referendum up. If the people who pushed the referendum are not even going to back the referendum, oh my God, stop calling yourself a democracy. And then you have Labour, who initially said, yes, we're going to give you a soft, baby soft, with talcum powder Brexit. But it will be Brexit, nonetheless, because Brexit doesn't have a meaning. It's a concept. And then Labour backs away from that. And not just backs away from that, takes the ludicrous position that a bunch of people who are ultimately Remainers are going to go and negotiate a fair, earnest deal for the third time. And then the Prime Minister, supposedly Jeremy Corbyn, will abdicate from the choice and not make a choice. He is a Brexiteer, and he's not going to take a choice. Missing the fact that part of your responsibility as Prime Minister is also to back up the fucking referendum. The public voted on that. Like, understand what I'm saying. I understand people love Corbyn. I like Corbyn too. But he has fucking dropped the ball. Your public, the British public, it doesn't matter that it was the Tories that put that. The British public votes on something. You, as the Prime Minister, are representative of that public. It doesn't matter what your party thinks. It doesn't matter that your party may be against you on that. The public chose something, and you, philosophically at least, is supposed to be the head of the government and represent the interests of the public. But the public chose. And you, as your first duty as Prime Minister, is to abdicate responsibility in backing up what the public chose and decided that it wanted to do. Now notice, my argument here is not for Tory or Labour. It has nothing to do with either of those things. It is the concept of a referendum. Yes, I'm more libertarian on this front. If your public chooses something, it looks like you would have a philosophical responsibility in living up to the fact that the public chose. And having the public look and observe your party do everything in its power to frustrate and stop Brexit. And I understand some of this is politics. When Theresa May was in office, you were screaming about an election. The moment that Boris Johnson got in office, you shut up about it and ran and hid. I have qualms with this. I have serious qualms with this. I mean, like straight to the soul of the individual, qualms with this. We are in a democratic order. And we take a social contract within that democratic order, right? I don't punch you, you don't punch me. I don't whack you, you don't whack me. I pay my taxes, you leave me to my devices. I leave you to your devices to a certain extent. And we decide on a game. And we play that game and say that we would abide by the rules of that game. And part of the rules of that game is that the philosophical veracity of any government that's in office comes from the public itself. Unless you have a totalitarian regime, in which case one strong man holds sway, and even then you can make an argument that the public to some degree allows that, even if it's implicit. How is that different than our government and us being born into this system? Again, that is implicit. You can dislike them for it, but they're born into a system that they accrue around just like you. And you have your issues, they have their issues, we all have our struggles. Leave them to their devices. That's the side point. Constitutional democracy. Keyword there, demos. The public, who is supposed to give you your legitimacy in a direct show of democracy, chooses. Not representative. Not representative. There's no static in the line. The public chooses. They say we want to go. Doesn't matter why. Doesn't matter why. They said they wanted to go. Both parties said we would abide by the tenets of the referendum. Great. Now, what that referendum is, you can hide within subjectivity on what it means. Fair enough. But that's not where we are right now. Where we are is one party saying, I'm going to get Brexit. The other party saying, fuck the referendum. We don't care what the public wants. I think that's fantastically dangerous, by the way. And Labour, neutral. But they're not neutral at all. The people who are at the top of the ticket, meaning of Corbyn's people on his front bench, are against Brexit. And they will campaign against Brexit, a deal that they want to get. They're de facto Remain, and they don't want to say they're Remain, which makes it look that much more dishonest. I know this sounds like I'm dinging Corbyn on this, and maybe I am. Because even if he wants to be Prime Minister, it seems like he has a responsibility to back up what the British public decided upon. And he's not going to do that. I have qualms. Strong, deep, philosophical qualms. It breaks the social contract. It breaks it. It obliterates it. We don't like something that you voted on, so we're going to blow it off. Yes, it is a social contract as long as you're doing what we want you to do. And in this case, it's some kind of ruling class that ignored what the public wanted. I have qualms with that. Stop pretending as if you're a constitutional democracy in this case, if you're going to blow off what the public wants. I'm bothered by that. But by the same token, that's hefted up against a guy who's a flagrant liar. And in being a flagrant liar, it's going to, I would strongly put to you, undermine the NHS. Just saying. Just saying. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.